Good afternoon. Climate protests in London have already cost West End businesses £12 million and London's mayor must act now. That's the message from the organisation that represents shops and other firms in and around Oxford Street, which is the focus of action by the climate change protest group Extinction Rebellion. It says the final cost of business will be tens of millions of pounds and that authorities must stop the disruption. Well, joining me now is Jace Tyrrell. He's Chief Executive of the new West End company. He's in our central London studio. Jace, very good afternoon to you. So to what extent is footfall in the West End being affected by these demonstrations?
Well, it's been very disruptive. I mean, the first point to make is, West End businesses fully support the right for in appropriate locations. But this is pulling the West End to a halt. It's very disruptive in the middle of Oxford Circus and Marble Arch. It's affecting our customers, our staff getting to the area, and it's also hitting the bottom line of our retailers. So it's really challenging to work through this. And it's now day 3 with little sign of let up.
I was struck in your letter to the Mayor. You actually say, there's a line in it where you say companies and their employees should be allowed to go about their lawful business without being threatened. Are you suggesting that some of these protesters are threatening shop workers?
Not threatening as far as violence, but we have seen some graffiti and activity around the area. But it's more the threat of not being able to get to work, to move around the area, and perhaps that feeling of intimidation to the West End shopping district. So I think what we'd like to see is the Mayor and the Met to find a more appropriate location in central London for the protesters to continue their peaceful protests, but not hold the West End to ransom in terms of the current disruption that it's causing.
Well, as you say, I mean, people do have the right for lawful protest. I mean, what would be a proportionate response from the authorities?
Well, I think at the moment you cannot move through Oxford Circus or Marble Arch, whether you're traffic or a customer or staff members. And we're really concerned about the emergency services. Of course, they need to be able to move around central London. So I think it's about finding the appropriate locations in central London if these protests are going to continue, but really seeing some firm action. I mean, if you've been down there, there's literally a boat bolted to the middle of Oxford Circus. It's now been there for 3 days. I think the question a lot of our businesses and also customers and people looking around the world is, when did that become appropriate in central London to have a protest of that nature?
Well, of course, a lot of these protesters, they've alighted on the West End of London because they say that fast fashion, disposable fashion, is contributing to this climate change. We're all buying too many clothes and then disposing of them that we don't need.
I think, businesses absolutely recognise how important climate change is, and particularly sustainability, and there's been good work done in that in the last couple of years. But this is about the disruption causing today, to our customers and our staff and deliveries for business to function. So I think, as I said at the start, West End businesses fully support the right to protest, but actually this is causing significant damage to our area.
I mean, I'm also struck in your letter, you suggest that if we're not careful, central London risks becoming like Paris, where they have these sort of protests week in, week out, fires being lit all over the place. You seriously think London could become like that?
Well, I think the challenge with Paris, it's now been 18 weeks this has continued, and you've seen the disruptions that's caused. We've spoken to many businesses that operate in London and Paris, and this has cost hundreds of millions in terms of that disruption. So we're not saying we're there yet, but if we don't grip this, find the appropriate locations, then we could see similar activity that's happened in Paris continue in London, which would be hugely damaging at a time that our retailers really need all the support they can get. And I hope that, your viewers watching this will still continue to come up to the West End this weekend over Easter in the parts of the West End that are still functioning.
Well, how much would the price be to the West End if these kind of protests drag on right through the Easter weekend at the current level that they're taking place?
Well, we're taking a check daily, and actually the last couple of days we've seen an average of 25% drop in spend. It was about £12 million yesterday. Obviously there's disruption today, and the impact is customers perhaps thinking they're not going to come up over the bank holidays. So this could go into the hundreds of millions if we don't grip this and try and open up Oxford Circus and Marble Arch pretty quickly.
All right, Jace Tyrrell from the West End company. Very good to see you. Thanks for joining me.